Hello and welcome. I'm Dave Hill, the editor and publisher of the journalism website onlondon.co.uk. My guest for this edition of the True London podcast is Marina Ahmad, a Labour Party member of the London Assembly, representing Lambeth and Southwark, and currently chair of the Assembly's Police and Crime Committee. Marina, welcome. I'd like you to bring my viewers and listeners up to speed with some of the stuff that's been going on with the Met. A lot of the media coverage recently might suggest that the service is still going from crisis to crisis and from scandal to scandal. However, Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner, is seeking to reform the service along the lines recommended in the Casey review. So how would you say things are going?
Right. Well, first of all, hello, Dave, and it's great to be here. So specifically talking about the issues with the Met and what people will, I think, quite rightly think are ongoing issues. I mean, if we can just step back for a moment, Casey was, we talk about it being a watershed moment. For me, it was a very personal moment as well, because, you know, we've had so many different reports. I was very active during the time of Macpherson, and it at the time, you know, it was described as a watershed moment. And when Casey came out and the revelations and the recommendations from Casey came out 2.5 years ago, I remember just, I was so upset because my feeling was we cannot be back here again. Basically, Casey for me was it was actually a listening failure, and the Met knows, and the leadership of the Met knows, that this cannot happen again, and I don't want to see it happen again. The Met is a service. We talk about it being there by public consent, policing by consent, and consent does not enable or allow the issues that Casey picked up to carry on happening.
Okay. Do you think Mark Rowley is making significant progress?
So what we have to remember is that what Casey sadly exposed is decades and layers on layers of unacceptable behaviour. So it's not a simple solution. Mark Rowley, when he came in, was very clear about what the issues are, and I think that in itself was a huge difference, actually acknowledging and accepting that there are issues and this is the plan for change. And the last 2.5 years, I think they have shown a great deal of leadership in trying to change. Now look, I'm not here as an apologist or an advocate for the Met. I'm really clear about that. Obviously, my role at the Assembly is very much about scrutinising the Met, holding the Met to account, and making sure that the Met is as transparent as we can make it. But what I will say is that I have seen changes. The fact that within a very short period of time, to the process of sacking officers and members of police staff whose behaviour was unacceptable and is unacceptable, started to go through. The fact that there had been calls for the Met had listened to some of the things that came up in committee. I personally am absolutely clear, and have been for a long time, that the vetting process for Met officers when they first joined was not robust enough, but I wanted it to go further than that, and I wanted to have spot check vetting. All of that has now happened. That is now happening within the Met. These are wins, and I think the Met is on a trajectory of going in the right direction. The commitment that we have to neighbourhood policing is a huge part of that, about making communities feel safe. When we, wherever we live, whether that's London, whether that's, in the Highlands of Scotland, we want to feel safe when we step out of our front door, and we want to know that the people who are there to keep us safe are going to do so without fear or favour.
Do you think, so it's sometimes argued, let me throw this one at you, it's sometimes argued, I think one of your Assembly colleagues from the Green Party, Zoe Garber, has been the latest, as far as I'm aware, to make the suggestion that really the Met is such an unwieldy and difficult thing to turn around that there's really no alternative but to sort of break it up and start again. What do you think about that?
I absolutely disagree with my colleague Zoe Garbett, who I have lots of respect for. However, I don't believe that that's the way to take things forward. I think we need to give the Commissioner, the senior leadership, and the issues raised in Casey that are being addressed time to land. As I say, Dave, it's decades and layers of bad behaviour that need to be dealt with. It's like if you're cleaning a house and that's been, left for years and years, it doesn't happen overnight, does it?
Do you think, this is another idea that's been around for a while, that it would be easier to make the Met a properly responsive public service for Londoners if it was able to shed its national responsibilities? What do you think of that one?
So I think that the Met is very large, and I know that there are discussions that are ongoing at the moment about what elements of the Met should be about the Met, should be about policing London, and what parts of it actually maybe should be left to that on a national footing. So at the moment there are discussions that are being taken place about that. For me personally, I'd like to see what comes out of those discussions about the analysis before I comment on that.
Okay, who are the discussions involving? Can you tell us that?
The Home Office, of course, as always are looking at this, and of course the Met themselves.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. It's very interesting. Let's look at some specific issues that people have been very exercised about recently. So I find myself in an interesting position with the dismay that some of your colleagues and others have expressed about the closure of front counters. And of course the counter-argument to that is that very, very, very few people actually report crime in person at police stations or front counters, wherever they may be, and that you're better off spending the money on other things. So am I wrong to think that maybe the police are right about this?
I think you have to remember that where we are politically with this is that the Assembly itself and the Labour group itself were very opposed to the narrative. And what we really wanted more than anything was a public consultation. And what we had was clearly the Met had listened to public concerns around the potential closures, and actually they rejigged their original plans. What we do now have, though, is that there are only two 24-hour front counters across London. That's Lewisham and that's Charing Cross, and there are real issues around that. At the moment, North London isn't covered. Various other areas of London don't seem to have that, or they certainly don't have that 24-hour coverage, which is a matter of concern. What you also have to remember, and one of my very strong personal issues, is that people don't just come into the front counter to report crime. They come in for advice. They sometimes come in for sanctuary as well. So I had a case of a woman with her 3 young children who had fled domestic violence at 3 a.m, and the only place that she could go was to the local police station, where and at the time they did all the ringing round to find somewhere for her to go for the night, and there wasn't anywhere available, so she stayed in the police station. That isn't an unusual situation, and people coming in for all sorts of other reasons is not it's not unusual. So my concern is what is going to happen in those kinds of scenarios, and I would like to see better answers for those, because I don't think we've had that yet.
Okay, great, thank you. We've got this new thing called the Engage system, which I suppose is supposed to be one of the ways in which the police locally make themselves easier to get in touch with for local people and to interact with the public. So can you explain for everybody's benefit exactly what that is?
The Engage system replaced the old OWL system, which was very cumbersome, had real issues around data protection, etc. So this is something that now that is Met Police owned on a Met Police platform. And Engage is meant to be a system where you can report issues and low-level crime. Obviously, if it's anything serious, always call 999. But, if there was a concern about something within the neighbourhood that wasn't something that was serious but was an issue of concern, that can be reported on Engage. But Engage also is an information-giving platform as well. It was only launched in June 2025. So I would say, Dave, ask me in a year's time. I don't think we've got the data yet, and I think you have to give it time to land.
Okay, now I'm signed up to it, and occasionally I get these little messages, which are sort of quite interesting. But there's also, of course, there is, is it 911? See, yes. I can't even remember it with complete confidence, but there is this other number, which is for non-serious stuff. Does that still exist?
Yes, it does.
Okay, because
yes, it does. But really emphasise, if it is serious crime, ring 999.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. All right. So there's a few things going on. I just think, perhaps out there's a bit of confusion. But I take your point that it's still relatively early for Engage, and we have to see.
And also, Dave, if you are confused about it, what that tells me is that clarity needs to be there. So that's really useful intelligence for me, and that's a conversation, and that's an issue that I can raise with the Met and say, look, you've got to get your comms right on this, because people aren't clear about what to do and who to contact and when to contact.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much. Let's look at crime itself. And as we both know, there is a tremendous amount of publicity about crime levels in London. Certain politicians making some very large claims about how, famously, it's far too dangerous for anybody to walk around the West End of London after dark wearing jewellery. That was Nigel Farage. And just a constant sort of drumbeat of, don't go to London, it's far, far too dangerous, the streets are full of criminals, people are cowering in their homes. Now, without wishing to in any way understate the anxiety that some people feel and that bad things do happen, that is not the London that I live in. But then people say, well, look at the figures, so on and so forth. So what do you think is really going on with? We're really talking about street crime here, aren't we? I guess. What do you think is really going on out there?
Well, I'm really glad to say that's not to hear that you're saying that's not the London that you recognise. I'm certainly not cowering in my home. My two daughters certainly are not cowering in our home. And actually, what really does my head in is the right-wing narrative about doing London down. London, and I will always say this, it is the greatest city in the world. I'm proud to live in London. I'm proud to be a Londoner. And that narrative that is painted is not a London that I would say, the vast majority of Londoners would ever recognise. And I'm really tired of the right trying to sow division and sow it by spreading this kind of fear, which just is not played out and that people do not recognise. I mean, homicide, murder, the murder rate, you can't mess around with figures like, how many people were murdered in X number of years. That is down by 60% since 2003, and violent crime in every borough has gone down in the last year. So these are all really good news stories for London. I don't see the right wing yelling about that and saying, hey, look, we got it wrong, because they have got it wrong.
Okay, but I think everybody accepts that even if things maybe are beginning to go in the right direction now, there are big concerns about things like shoplifting and phone theft are the classic ones, and they are real things. So do you think that genuinely, because we always have to be a little bit careful with crime stats, don't we, how they're compiled, who reports them and so on, we always have to be a little bit careful with them. I mean, insofar as you can answer this question, do you really think that things are going in the right direction and the Met are playing a part in that?
You can't play around with murder stats.
Yeah, but I'm talking about. I understand. I take that point completely. But thankfully, murder is pretty rare. But stuff like phone theft and shoplifting, I mean, I've seen it at my own corner shop.
Yeah.
Three lads steam in there and make off with a bundle of stuff, and you know, when you see it, it's alarming. So that is real and it's going on. So do you think? I mean, I know the Met are talking about getting on top of it. They're pointing to statistics. Do you think this is that they're really making a difference?
I think they are, and I think they're beginning to, quite simply because it's that recognition. So let's just take the issue of shoplifting. Shoplifting, so in my own constituency of Lambeth and Southwark, so in Brixton, we had a targeted hit on a number of prolific shoplifters in the Brixton area, and it absolutely paid dividends. It was something like 80% of those retail crimes were carried out by a handful of people. Once those people were arrested and the targeting policing had taken place, shoplifting went down significantly. So I think it's a question of actually, the old BT advert, work smarter, and it's about that targeting, being more strategic around your thinking. With mobile thefts, we've recently had a massive increase in arrests around mobile thefts, and I know that the Mayor is working very hard with the mobile phone company. So why do people steal your phone? They don't steal, well, they certainly wouldn't steal my phone my phone because they like the look of my phone. They steal it because of the data on it. So if that data becomes very difficult or impossible to access, those phone thefts will go down anyway. So it's a belt and braces approach. It's making phones not something that people think are worth stealing, and that's happening, but also targeting the criminals who are doing that, and that itself is happening as well, and we've seen that.
Okay, good. All right. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to ask you another quite broad question to finish up with. In an appearance, I think it was the Institute for Government, I could be wrong about that, but anyway, it was an appearance that Mark Rowley made, and this is a couple of years ago now probably. He made the point, and it's sort of obvious, but to hear him say it the way he did was kind of brought it back home to you, was that he said that the vast majority of crime in London is committed by actually a very small number of people and against quite a small number of people, so that there are particular communities, groups who are the most susceptible to crime in general. And I thought that was quite a profound thing. So I don't know, what's your reaction to that? Do you think that's right? And if it's really important that the Met are helping and supporting particular communities that might be more vulnerable than others, do you think that work is being done?
So going back to what I said, I gave you the example of Brixton and shoplifting, and what we knew was that it was a small number of people who were actually carrying out the greatest volume of crime. So Mark Rowley, as the Commissioner, has the stats and is very aware of, who is committing the crimes on the whole. So, and I the information that I have suggests that is correct, quite simply because if in communities, I would suggest that a huge number of people know who it is that's actually committing the crimes, and it is those people that need to be targeted. It's what I said before, that basically it's about being very strategic in the operations that the police carry out, and I think we're seeing that now. The emphasis now on neighbourhood policing, both from the Met, from the government, from the Mayor, and it's something that I've always talked about. I believe that neighbourhood policing is where it's at. I'm so glad to see that it has been given the prominence within policing that it should have done, because that is where the intelligence comes from, that is where the trust and confidence is built, and that is where the work, I think, is done to stop these crimes. And it is through neighbourhood policing that the officers actually know who it is that is committing these crimes.
Fantastic. Well, I think my glass is now a little fuller than it was at the start of this conversation. You've kind of cheered me up a bit and
Oh, good.
given me a bit of confidence that things really are perhaps moving in the right direction. So thanks very much indeed,
My
Marina,
pleasure.
for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And this is where I say goodbye.
Bye-bye.